There's a voice that doesn't use words. It pulls you towards something you can't name, makes you question everything you've built. Buddhism calls it awakening. Christianity names it divine calling. Paganism knows it as ancestral remembering. But here's what nobody tells you about what happens when it arrives. Why? Ancient wisdom traditions describe the same unexplainable moment. You know that feeling when you're successful by every metric, but something inside you is screaming? Not anxiety, not depression, something older than psychology can explain. It's the moment when your carefully constructed life stops making sense, and you can't force it to matter anymore. Here's what makes this truly unsettling. Spiritual traditions separated by thousands of miles and centuries describe this exact same rupture. Buddhism speaks of the instant ignorance begins cracking. Christianity describes the soul recognizing its true home. Ancient paganism reveals the blood remembering what civilization tried to erase. Three paths. One hidden truth that nobody wants to admit. But here's where it gets strange. Buddhist teaching says this inner disruption arrives when you've finally exhausted yourself chasing impermanent things. The historical Buddha walked away from a kingdom because luxury felt like suffocation. Monks call this dukkha, existential suffering that refuses to be numb. It's not mental illness. It's radical clarity breaking through. It's the moment you realize you've been sleepwalking through a script someone else wrote for your life, and suddenly, something in you won't tolerate the performance anymore. This force doesn't ask permission. Christianity names this same phenomenon but frames it as violent interruption. Paul was hunting Christians when blinding light knocked him off his horse. Augustine was drowning in pleasures when a child's voice said, "Take and read." Francis was his father's heir until disgust with wealth overwhelmed him. The Christian calling isn't gentle invitation, it's confrontation. It's God ripping away your comfortable lies and forcing a choice. Mystics called this metanoia, consciousness turned inside out. Only there's something almost nobody notices about this. While Buddhism and Christianity talk about internal breaking points, ancient paganism reveals something even more disturbing. The call doesn't come from above or within. It comes from below. Celtic, Norse, and Slavic peoples believed Earth holds ancestral memory in the bones of those who walk on it. When you feel inexplicable chills in ancient places, when forests calm you without reason, when full moons stir something unnamed, that's not superstition. That's recognition. Shamans taught that nature spirits call those who've forgotten their wild origins. This summons doesn't ask you to meditate or pray. It demands you return. Remove your shoes. Feel mud, wind, fire. And this is where everything shifts. Because all these traditions agree on something terrifying, ignoring the call has consequences. Buddhism teaches that resisting awakening prolongs suffering through countless lifetimes. In samsara, Christianity warns that rejecting the divine voice hardens the heart until it hears nothing. Paganism insists that denying your wild nature turns you into a ghost, alive but soulless. Three warnings, same urgency, same price for refusal. What these traditions won't tell you about spiritual timing. Here's what all these paths also agree on. The call never arrives when you're ready. Never. Buddha was about to become king. Paul had a thriving career persecuting heretics. Pagans were summoned during harvests, wars, weddings. The calling doesn't respect your timeline. And there's a spiritual reason for this. It's not coming to save you from boredom. It's coming to destroy who you think you are. Tibetan Buddhism has a brutal concept, bardo, the state between death and rebirth. But masters teach you don't need physical death to cross bardos. Every profound existential crisis is a small death. Unexpected divorce, job loss, illness, disillusionment with everything you built. In these moments, ego structure fractures. And it's precisely in that fracture where the inner call enters like a blade. Not to comfort, to complete the demolition. Zen monks say, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him, meaning even your sacred ideas must die for true awakening to emerge. Only there's something almost nobody notices. Christianity uses different language, but points to the same necessary violence. Jesus didn't say, "Come when you're ready." He said, "Whoever doesn't renounce everything cannot be my disciple." Christian mysticism uses the image of dark night of the soul, the period when God removes all consolations, not punishment. purification by fire. Teresa Avila and John of the Cross described years of spiritual emptiness, where prayers seemed to hit concrete walls. Not because God withdrew, but because false images of God needed burning. The Christian call doesn't lead you to safety. It leads you to the desert where internal demons appear unmasked. And here's what truly disturbs. Pagan traditions were even more direct about this. Shamanic initiations involved forced isolation in forests, extreme fasting, near-death experiences. Vikings believed Odin hung himself on the Yggdrasil tree for 9 nights to gain wisdom of the runes. Celtic druids spent years in dark caves. The pagan call demanded proof you'd bleed for it, not spiritual theater. Real testing. Are you willing to lose everything for this hidden truth? Many were called. Few survived the journey. Those who returned weren't the same people. They were living portals between worlds. And this opens a door few dare cross. All these traditions suggest the inner call isn't for everyone. Sounds cruel, but ancient texts are clear. Buddha taught not everyone has mature karma for awakening in this life. Jesus spoke in parables, saying, "Many hear, few understand." Pagan shamans believed spirits choose only some to carry sacred knowledge. The calling isn't democratic. It's selective, mysterious, merciless, and it doesn't care about your plans. What if the calling isn't testing your faith, but your courage? Here's the twist nobody tells you. Maybe the inner call isn't asking you to believe something. Maybe it's testing whether you have courage to become who you actually are. And that distinction changes everything about how you respond. Mahayana Buddhism teaches something radical. Enlightenment isn't personal achievement. It's revelation that separation never existed. Bodhisattvas, enlightened beings, vow not to enter final nirvana, while a single being suffers. Why? Because they realize there's no separate self, apart from others. The Buddhist call doesn't invite escape from the world. It forces you to dive deeper into it with fierce compassion. Monks who self-immolate in protest aren't fleeing. They're screaming truth nobody wants to hear. That's courage, not blind faith. But here's where it gets strange. Early Christianity was a martyr's religion, not because they loved suffering, but because the call was more real than life itself. Stephen was stoned while smiling. Perpetua refused to deny Christ even with her small child crying for her. First Christians were thrown to lions in Roman arenas singing hymns. They weren't suicidal. They were people who heard something so true that fear of death became irrelevant. The Christian call doesn't ask you to be nice. It asks you to be incendiary, to live this hidden truth so intensely others can't ignore it. Only there's something almost nobody notices. Norse paganism had the concept of word destiny woven by the Norns, 3 sisters controlling life's threads. But Vikings didn't see fate as prison. They saw it as summons to radical courage. Dying in battle was honor not for violence, but because it meant not retreating from your word. Berserkers entered battle trance where fear vanished completely. They weren't insane. They were men and women who heard the ancestral call and answered with their entire bodies. And here's what truly disturbs. All these traditions agree the call always demands what you don't want to give. Buddhism asks you to release control. Christianity asks you to release pride. Paganism asks you to release civilization. 3 demands. Same terror, because the inner calling doesn't want your improved version. It wants your true version. Wild, vulnerable, untamed. And that's more frightening than any hell doctrine could threaten. If you've felt this call, comment the word courage and answer with brutal honesty. What are you most afraid of losing if you follow this voice? Hit like if this video is touching something you've been trying to ignore. Subscribe because we're going deeper into sacred mysteries nobody has the guts to speak about. How to know if your calling is real or just modern spiritual crisis. Now comes the question that cuts like a knife. How do you know if what you're feeling is actually a sacred calling or just anxiety wearing a spiritual mask? Because we live in an era where everyone's awakening, every influencer sells enlightenment, every crisis becomes a hero's journey. Ancient traditions had clear answers, and they're not comfortable. Theravada Buddhism teaches true calling comes with 3 unmistakable marks: anicca, brutal impermanence; dukkha, suffering that doesn't lie; and anatta, complete absence of solid self. If your awakening makes you feel special, chosen, superior, it's not awakening. It's ego dressed as monk. True Buddhist calling crushes you before it liberates you. It shows you everything you love will disappear, that every pleasure carries seeds of pain, that there's nobody inside to save. It's terrifying, it's liberating, it's real. But here's where it gets strange. Christian mysticism had an even more brutal test. Fruits of the Spirit. Paul listed 9: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Not feelings. Fruits, concrete results growing from the tree. If your calling leaves you arrogant, judgmental, impatient with the unenlightened, it's not God. It's internal demon wearing a sacred mask. True Christian calling breaks you into humility, makes you wash feet of those you despise, puts you on your knees before beggars and prostitutes. Jesus didn't call theologians to be apostles. He called rough fishermen and corrupt tax collectors. The calling chooses the discarded. Only there's something almost nobody notices. Ancient paganism measured authenticity of calling through body, not mind. Shamans didn't trust visions that produced no healing. If after your awakening you can't relieve others' pain, it's worthless. Vikings didn't respect warriors who only talked about battle. They respected those who bled and returned. Druids didn't crown sages who memorized poems. They crowned those who knew when to plant, when to harvest, when to let earth rest. The pagan call demanded tangible results. Are you more alive, more connected, more useful to your tribe? If not, you're fantasizing. And this is where everything shifts. Because all these traditions agree on the hardest final truth. Real calling always pushes you toward service, not spiritual comfort. Buddhism sends you back to the world to relieve suffering. Christianity sends you to difficult labor among the last. Paganism anchors you in earth to heal what's broken. True calling never ends in you. It flows through you like a river and continues irrigating others. That's the test nobody passes by accident. If all this makes dangerous sense to you, comment service. What's the difference between real spirituality and disguised escape? Leave your answer. Like this video if it confronted something inside you. Subscribe because this channel doesn't sell comfortable spirituality. Share it with someone confused about their own calling. Use the word truth when you send it.